Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing very, very well. My glasses are dirty right now and I can't bother to get up and clean them, so I don't know if I'm in focus. I can't see anything. So we are back again with some more Duffer Brothers disastrous content. I'm also snuggled up in a blanket because it's freezing and it's like -degrees and I have no white blood cells and I'm anemic, so I don't know how I'm alive. I have just finished watching the Stranger Things documentary that got released, the One Last Adventure thing, and I really want to talk about it because I don't know what that was. Even though Stranger Things obviously didn't end well, I went into the documentary just on a positive or kind of neutral stance because I was really excited to just see the making of this season and maybe why they chose specific ideas and kind of what went on behind the scenes. However, this really was just a Duffer Brothers documentary, and I think a lot of the decisions that we have seen them make in this documentary actually justifies the reaction to the Stranger Things finale. There are a lot of things that went on and have been said in this documentary which for me is such red flags to everything. I don't really know how to feel, so I thought we would sit down and we would just have a little yap about it because so straight off the bat, we are told that they went into production even though they hadn't finished the script or the story. Now, this actually is fine. I have no grievances against this because it's actually quite normal. A lot of the films that, majority of films and TV shows do go into production without it being finished. However, there's one point in this documentary where they reveal that they were filming episode 8, and which is the finale, and the finale script was not finished and they had no idea what was going on. Multiple members of the crew said that they had no idea what they were doing. They were without scripts. They hadn't set people had no idea what they were doing. Outfit people had no idea what they were doing. The filming crew, everything was really up in the air because they had not finished the script for the finale. The Duffer Brothers said earlier on that they filmed the majority of Stranger Things in as much of the chronological order as they could. So if they were filming episode 8, this was far into your production. This is where I draw the line of it kind of being okay, because starting production is fine if you haven't finished the whole thing, totally fine. Ending the production or getting near to the end of production and you haven't finished your script is a little bit of crazy behavior to kind of admit, I'll be honest. I just felt that was very, very odd as well, because I feel like for the finale, you should know where you're going with things, and you should have things written. For writers who like to say that they've had things planned from season 2 onwards, this feels very contradictory, but I also think it's very disrespectful to the cast and the crew, because how are they supposed to really connect with their work if they have no idea what they're doing? It will come back to the actors and the studio people. Like, for example, the different colored dials or levers, whatever it was, makes a lot of sense now because a lot of people had no idea what they were doing. So the set designers probably did that by accident, but they had no idea where they were going. So that was probably a reshoot because they would have had to reshoot some things. That's where you openly create plot holes for yourself and unexplored little things which lead to things like conformity gate, for example. Along with this, you then also cause issues on screen. For example, there's a few scenes in this documentary where the cast actually call out the writers for getting things wrong. For example, the scene where Robin, Vicky, Lucas and Max are being chased by the demogorgons and they're in the basement thing. Sean Levy, I think it was like, oh, I want Robin and Vicky to be holding hands here. But Maya Hawke actually calls this out and says, but Lucas doesn't know that we're together. And he's like, oh yeah. And then as well as this, there is also a scene where Natalie Dyer kind of calls the Duffers out and is like, is this scientifically proven? Is this fine? Like, what's going on? And I think when your actors are calling you out for things not making sense or for kind of writing errors, I think this is where we have a problem, because your cast members are not writers. They are given what they are given and they do their work. So the fact that they have to also kind of be on edge and kind of be like, but that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. I think really shows, I think, the lack of confidence they had with season 5. I think that was the big thing. I think the Duffers, they have worked hard. I'm not kind of arguing that they haven't, but I think with season 5 they kind of lost their identity with Stranger Things. I think they had totally, I think it had gone on for longer than they had thought, and I think they really had lost touch with what makes Stranger Things, and what the audience love about Stranger Things. The audience love the season 1 vibe of small town mystery that's going on. And I think when you compare season 1 to season 5, it really is a totally different concept. So I do think by the time that they had got to season 5, they had lost identity with themselves and the identity of Stranger Things, because season 1, 2, and 3 have this vibe amongst them. By the way, I didn't realize season 3 had so many shooters. I didn't know so many people didn't like season 3. I thought people liked season 3. I really like season 3. I didn't realize. Oh my god, I did not realize. But regardless, it still had this feel about it which felt very Stranger Things-esque and felt, like the show that we had grown up with. I think season 4 did have aspects of that as well, but I think season 4 and 5 to me just feel totally like another. I kind of split the show into 2 parts. It's season 1 to 3 and then 4 to 5. It just feels, not that it feels disconnected, because I don't think season 4 was bad, but it feels like a completely different thing that we're going with. And I don't know, I don't know. I think it really did lose its identity, and I think the Duffers knew that, and I think this led to them having this lack of confidence with the show and their writing in season 5. There is a really interesting scene with Jamie, who plays Vecna, and he's having a conversation with one of the Duffers. I don't know if it's the one that got divorced or the other one, but he wants to kind of talk more about the lore behind Henry. And he says that it's interesting that although he had suffered all this trauma in his home as a child, he still chose to go back there and use it as his like kind of base. And that he was, trying not to be his dad and trying to kind of go against what he had suffered. And then he also talks about lore to do with the play. The play lore is really frustrating because they kind of touched upon it and it is confirmed to be canon. They touched on it, but they didn't really explore it further. And I think the shadow play was a really good concept to add into the show and actually explains a lot of lore behind the show. But he talks about, there's a character in the play called Patty. I haven't watched the play. I believe she's Bob's sister. I could be making that up, but she's basically one of the only people to have ever shown Henry love. And Jamie says that it's crazy, and he mentions Patty and stuff. And I think this is such a really good, I don't know, I really enjoyed Jamie talking about his character and taking his character seriously, and being so invested into his character. I've always seen everywhere when people play villains, they get really invested into their characters because you have to go into such a different mental state than what you are normally in. So I really enjoyed him saying this and talking about Henry in this way. And it's not that I definitely didn't want a redemption arc for Henry. I think one of the good things on the show that they did was not give Henry a redemption arc. I'm so happy they went down that route. I think the writing for when they tried to give Henry the redemption arc, but then he was like, actually, yes, the mind flare overtook me, but at some point I chose it and I wanted it, was such a good way to go with things. But the Duffers' reaction to Jamie saying this was just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. And it's like, what? Like, you're the people you're hiring to play these characters are talking about these characters in a really emotional way that really connects to them and the audience and your writing, and you're just kind of like, downplaying it. He's actually doing the writing for you. And there's another scene in the documentary which was also very annoying, looking back on things, where one of the writers, I believe he was one of the writers for the season 1 finale, The Sorcerer, and Dear Billy, which are some of the best episodes on Stranger Things. I think they're like the highest rated episodes. He said that he thinks there being no demos of any form, bats, demogorgons, demodogs, in the abyss during the fight was a crazy idea, and that he thinks they should be included, which I feel like everybody agrees. This has been a big talking point since the finale aired. Where were the demogorgons? They just kind of like disappeared, and I think we all would have loved for the demos to have been part of the final battle, because this is a final battle, so everything from season 1 kind of needs to be there and make it really full circle. But the Duffers replied with saying that there's a demo fatigue and they didn't think they needed to be in the final battle, which I think is crazy. Demo fatigue? Wow, girl. Personally, I really like the demos, and I think this is crazy, but I think it grounds us and it brings us back to season 1 and the show that we had started off with. I don't know, I don't think there is a demo fatigue. I don't really know where they got that from, I'll be honest. I think them having to battle the demos as well as Vecna and the Mind Flare really would have created this really good battle and really have high stakes among there, and would have also longed the battle out and would have just given us so much more to deal with, and so much more like, oh my god, like our characters were in trouble type of thing. But instead we were just left with nothing, which therefore creates its own kind of plot hole and plot line that's just like kind of not explored or touched upon. And then they come up with that crappy excuse of, oh, the attack was unexpected. We also got a bunch of like, not deleted scenes, but a bunch of scenes that were supposed to happen that didn't happen. There's one where Hopper knew about Elle's fake death and helped set it up, which makes so much sense with Hopper's conversation with Mike at the end of the show. I felt like that conversation at the end of the show was so random, because it felt like Hopper had just kind of like got over Eleven's death very, very quickly. So I found that to be very, very weird. I felt odd, but if they had done the thing where Hopper knew about the death and that he knew that 11 was actually alive and safe, that would have made so much sense, because I feel like one of the weird things about the finale was that everyone's reactions to 11's death was very odd, except for Mike. Everyone seemed to have kind of like grieved her and get over her very, very quickly, so it kind of would have made sense if Hopper did. And there's also another thing with Hopper where when Callie was dying and bleeding out, he went over to help her and had a heart-to-heart. This would have been really, really nice, because I understand Hopper and Callie's relationship in season 5, and I understand why they dislike each other, but I think actually when Callie's dying and Hopper kind of comes to the realization that she is just a child as well, like 11, that could have been really, really nice, and having a heart-to-heart, because he would have known the trauma that she faced, because 11 also faced very similar trauma. Then I can't believe they didn't do this, but there was a scene where Will was supposed to confront the Mind Flare and fight the Mind Flare and kind of be injured from that, whilst the gang went into the hive mind to rescue all of the kids. I can't believe they didn't do this. One of my gripes with Stranger Things 5 is that I don't think Will got closure. I really don't think he got closure, and he's been through so much that him not confronting the Mind Flare at the end of the show just is kind of like, okay, so we did all of this for what exactly? Obviously we had 11 kind of confronting Vecna and confronting her trauma, but Will not doing that is kind of crazy. I feel like in the final battle, Will got really pushed to the back, and I feel like he kind of got forgotten, because it goes back to what the Duffers said about Will was disconnected from the hive mind, but we didn't see it and it happened off screen. I'm like, that's an important part in your story. So for them to say that Will was a focal point of their story in season 5, in the heart of season 5, despite Holly having more screen time than him, by the way, which is crazy. Them not doing a scene where Will confronts the Mind Flare is so wild, because I feel like that would have made the battle so much better. It would have been really nice for Eleven and Will to kind of team up and fight Vecna and the Mind Flare. So odd, so odd. There was also supposed to be a scene where Dr. K gets killed, which again would solve that plot hole of where did she go, and also maybe would have solved the plot hole about how they just all kind of got away with all their criminal actions and were fine to just live life as normal. Don't know why they didn't put that in there. I feel like that's quite an important thing to put in. As well as this, they actually had a table read and they realised at that point that they had too many cast members. A gripe with season 5 for me is that I think the cast was too big. I think there was people involved that didn't need to be involved, and I think there should have been a lot more deaths as well. I would have killed Ted. I would have killed either Nancy or Jonathan. I would have not had Murray and Scott Clark as invested into the story. I'm really sad that Erica got pushed to the back as well, because Erica really carries season 3 and season 4, and I feel really sad for the actress that, I don't know, I don't think we got closure on her character, but I think the cast was too big, and adding all of the children as well just made the cast way too big. I really like in season 1 and 2 when the cast, even 3, where the cast is quite small, it just felt a whole lot better. So I think when we got to season 5 and it was a thing of everyone's there, like the whole town at this point, that felt very like, this is too much. This is too much. There's also an alternate ending as well, where Eleven is seen on the other side of the rift. She does not return. Eleven says goodbye through a happy memory. Hopper knows that she won't return, but that she's alive. The Upside Down is destroyed. Eleven is gone, but not dead. I also really like this tweet here. I think this is really summarizes it. I love how the documentary proves that this failure of a season was the Duffers' full responsibility. They were aware of the plot holes and the scripts that were rushed, and there was a lot of pressure, and yet they refused any input from the actors and writers because of their ego. That's another thing, actually. They said multiple times that they don't want things to, they have to solve everything, and they don't want unanswered questions and stuff like that. They don't want anything hanging, yet they leave things hanging. So the fact that they are aware of plot holes is a huge thing, because that to me just shows the laziness that came with this season. It's a shame they didn't take input from people who were trying to help, because I think the other ideas that were floating around would have made the reaction to the finale much better than ultimately what it was. The documentary overall felt quite weird. It felt like a Duffers documentary. It kind of jumped a lot between episodes. I think it skipped episode 7, 4 and 3 or 5, I can't remember, but they skip a lot of content and it's more just focus on the Duffers. But I wanted to see the cast and their reaction to things and actually filming stuff, and I don't know, it wasn't what I thought it would be. The way they spoke about Eleven's death was so disrespectful. The way they were talking about it was just so odd and was so disrespectful to Eleven and the journey that we went on with her, and also Millie. They were saying that the whole season kind of like is building up to her ending her life, and then one of the brothers was like, we're gonna make the audience think that she's not gonna end her life, and then psych, she does it. It's like, is this a joke to you? Like, Eleven has been on this whole journey. I have such an issue with Eleven's death, because 2 victims of abuse dying in your finale and like giving the message that you have to end your life to end the cycle of abuse is crazy, like actually crazy. Talking about that like that was so odd, and you could see the reactions to people in the room when they were saying this, and I don't know, just the way they were talking about it was definitely a thing of like them doing it for shock factor, and rather than actually for the story, and just kind of being like, oh, like joking about it, like saying psych. That's crazy. Also, no one really understood the point of Holly, which is crazy, because I think Holly was like obviously like the main character of this season, but people including Natalie Dyer didn't really understand kind of like her whole thing and like what was the point and why she had such a big presence. And like I get it, but also I feel like it could have been someone else. I feel like if it was like an Erica situation, that could have been really cool, someone who we had like more connection with. I did think them kind of recasting Holly and making Holly that lead character out of nowhere was a bit odd, so it's weird that the actors kind of also felt the same about that. The documentary is like overwhelmingly negative, and I think they're finding anything they can to speak positive about, but I think they're really struggling. Like, they said so many times that they had no idea what they're doing, and I think they expected the finale to have a better reaction than what it did. So I think they were fully expecting the documentary to say, oh, we had no idea what we're doing, but we still did a really good finale. But because the finale, the reaction it had, the actual side of it that we're seeing is them just being clowned for it, because we're fully aware that you had no idea what you're doing. We're fully aware that the scripts weren't written well. We know because of the reaction that we had to the season finale, but I think they were thinking that people would have a good reaction to the finale. So ultimately, when it didn't happen, they know that they kind of screwed up there, but they're trying to be positive about it, but it's so negative. They also forgot to register like 3 of the episodes. I don't know how you do that. How do you not register the episodes? I think that is actually insane to kind of admit. There is a comment here that says, this doesn't feel like a documentary at all. Where are the archived photos or videos from the shoots? Where are all the good fun times? How they did this and that with the special effects? And why is it just the Duffers talking about how they didn't want to be writers but directors and didn't know what they were doing? That's another thing. There was a scene in the documentary where the Duffers were like, we didn't even want to be writers, we just wanted to produce. Why are you like admitting that? Some of the things that they're admitting at, this is like career suicide. I'm going to be honest. I don't really know why they're admitting these things, because saying that you didn't want to write and then it being proved with your season finale being so bad is crazy. I wanted to see the behind the scenes of Stranger Things, but this just felt like the brothers just complaining about having to work and do the work and finish the show for like the whole documentary, and that is not what I wanted. That is it for this video. I just wanted to kind of chat with you about the documentary to see how you guys are feeling about it, because it felt very odd to me. I tried to go in with, you know, a positive mindset, but I couldn't. I watched it and I was like, this is not a real thing. Like, I just didn't understand how this was a real documentary that they were trying to do. I would love to hear your opinion on it down below if you have watched it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.